All right, so welcome everyone. Now, before we dive in, let's do a little visualization exercise. If you can picture the best boss or the best leader that you've ever encountered, uh, what made the person memorable? Can you share? And how did it feel to be led by the person? Anybody? No one?
I'll go first, Charlotte. I remember when I
Yeah.
started my IT career, quite by accident in Toronto. I have 7 years of university physics and couldn't get a job, so I ended up taking a job in IT, which I hated. But anyways, 24 years of that didn't do me any harm, I suppose. But I remember one of the first guys I worked for, his name was Mike Peters, and this was GE at the time, General Electric. And so I remember him sending me out to different, installations across the city and sometimes to troubleshoot. And at times I would be sent in to troubleshoot what another systems engineer in our company may have done wrong and caused the problem in the network, and I had to go and fix it. And I remember coming back to the office and saying, Mike, so and so who you sent to me for me, one of my colleagues, it was his fault, and because of that, this the problem was created, and I had to go and fix his problem. And he said to me, he took me to his office and he said, Anthony, have a seat. He said, in my team, we don't point fingers as whose fault it was. He said, simply, we take the approach, what is the problem and what is the solution? He said, because, next week it could be you that mess up and then somebody has to fix your problem. So he said, I don't want to really get that into that finger pointing. And he said, and furthermore, he said, if you get sent out to a client who maybe used to deal with computer land or business land or one of the other providers, and they were fed up with them, and now they have GE going in, and the client starts to gripe about the former provider, he said, do not play into that as well. Say, well, I'm sure they're a good company. I'm sure they have their own merits, but how can we help you? So he taught me how to really not do this sort of, finger pointing or blame game. Just be secure about your own abilities and simply move forward with that in a very positive manner. So he was a very influential manager on me. He seemed to have the ability to see the big picture. And I think that's what I
Uh-huh.
think about managers today, because I think a lot of when I signed up, I said one of the things that I'd like to discuss was how do we, how do managers become more transformational leaders as opposed to transactional managers? Because today we all have email and we're all on our own personal assistants. In my days in GE, you didn't have
Mm-hmm.
email or you didn't do Word. You simply gave that to a secretary who did that for you. And so you wouldn't bog down in all the micro transactional details that today I think managers are bogged down with. So, this guy, Mike Peters, was much more of a transformational leader. Maybe he had the time the bandwidth to do it. So in any case, so just
Mm-hmm.
that was my observation of him, and my observation today of leaders is that they're just so bogged down with all the transactional stuff that they don't really have time to mentor and to really bring their staff along to a higher level
Mm-hmm.
of functioning.
Yes, that's very true. And leaders get stuck in operations. I see it in my coaching, like in the big multinationals. They don't have time for coaching. They don't have time for strategic thinking. They are running around like headless chickens, putting out fires one after another, and then they cannot delegate, right, because they cannot trust their team, and it
Mhm.
becomes a vicious circle. So that's an excellent point. So we have David. Welcome, David, you made it.
I'm so sorry. I didn't know that my watch was, my battery is failing and I was 14 minutes behind. I thought I still had 7 minutes to get here, and you'd all started without me, and I was literally the last one to know. My apologies, everyone, for making you wait.
That's perfectly okay. So welcome, Amy. Welcome, Catherine. We might get more people trickle in as we go along, but we are starting with a share about the best leader we've ever encountered, to see what we are really aiming for. So, anybody else is willing to share? Janice, Amy, Catherine?
The experience recently working for somebody who was just very transparent, clear, concise in the communication, very supportive, of the staff, but also very clear about the expectations of how we were going to operate and what he expected. And he would have an honest and transparent conversation with you if there was an issue. So he was just an exceptional leader all around and really modeled it well.
Amy, Catherine? So anybody else from the panel? Kevin, have you always been your own boss?
No, not always. When I first began my career working with global multinationals, I would say one of the managers that I found most impactful put me first and put himself second. It was not about him, it was about me and ensuring that I was developing in alignment with, at that time, American Express International. And I just appreciated that. I thought this gentleman knows what leadership is all about.
Yes, a servant leader, right? Someone who removes obstacles from your way and ensures that you've got all the tools to succeed. That's an amazing point. How about you, David?
I suspect I've had the experience that I think most people have, where most of the managers I've encountered over the years or leaders have been less than competent, less than fantastic, which is probably more, unfortunately, the norm than not. I was listening while you were all speaking and trying to think of, who can I remember who was wonderful, and I really wasn't coming up with much.
Yes, and that's why we are here, right? Because that seems to be much more common than would be healthy. Personally, I started with my partner. I started the business pretty early on, so I haven't really had a boss, for my career. But I had summer jobs, and I had some pretty bad managers as well, and people who were rather unethical in what they were asking me to do. But I had supervisors or leaders during my schooling, and the best of them were truly inspirational. And they would show respect and allow the people who were willing to do the work and to think for themselves, they would totally allow them to do it. But they adjusted based on what the person needed. So someone who needed more handholding, they would have provided that. And the people who were autonomous, they were given the freedom to really perform. So this is what we are chasing in leadership, right? People who are able to adjust, people who are able to inspire, who give you the freedom, who are servant leaders, who are transformational leaders. So we can talk about that a little bit more, Anthony, for sure. So today we are pulling back the curtain on why we miss the mark so often, and what can we do to make excellent leadership happen. Oh, sorry, I have another person joining. All right. So let me introduce you to our extraordinary panel today. So we had another session on Tuesday for our Australian friends, and we had Emily Yaksh on the call as part of the panel, and she made some very interesting points. So we'll share with you the replay for that session as well. And she is the go-to person if you need coaching or assistance with leadership development in Australia, New Zealand. Then we have Kevin. Kevin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning. My name is Kevin Asbjornsen. I'm an Icelandic American based in Denver, Colorado. I've been in the field of global talent and leadership development for 30 years, and I'm the founder of the Institute of Inspired Leadership and have colleagues in 6 different cities around the world. We work primarily with global multinationals, NGOs, and not-for-profits.
Thank you. And David.
Yes, I'm David Towler. I'm the president of Creative Organizational Design. We're a assessment company, much like Arch Profiles, and use their tools with our clients along with many, many others. And our area of expertise is in assessments. And we've got 5,000 or something at this point, available for practically every need under the sun, and an entire category devoted to leadership identification, leadership development, team building, conflict management, et cetera, et cetera. And I've done this for 25 years now, I think, working from home long before it was cool.
Excellent. All right, and I'll just do a plug for Emily again. Emily is she's the founder of HR Gurus, so you will get her information as well if you need to reach her. Do you want to do a bigger plug for her, David?
No, I think that's sufficient, and people can find her on her website, and there's a lot of information there about who she is and what she does. And if you're going to share yesterday's recording, then that will fill in the gaps, I think, sufficiently.
Yes, perfect. All right, so let's jump into the first question. And please, the audience, if you have a question, just unmute yourself or drop it in the chat, and we'll be happy to respond. Okay, nobody else is waiting yet. Okay. All right, so the main order of business today is about being promoted into incompetence. How the heck does that happen in the first place? Why does it happen? And what should be done instead? So open to the panelists. Who wants to go first? Kevin, how about you?
Sure. Since my career has transcended the 20th and the 21st century, I've got a couple of observations. One of the primary reasons the wrong people are promoted is that many organizations are still working on 20th century models of leadership, which are no longer relevant and applicable. In the 21st century, which we are now in, we're in a century where inspired leadership is the key model. And one of the premises behind that is that leaders inspire people, people motivate themselves. And I want to repeat that again. Leaders inspire people, people motivate themselves. And so at the top of the house, we've got outdated leadership models from the 20th century, which haven't been replaced. At the bottom of the house, we have worldwide research confirming that the primary reason people are leaving their jobs in companies is because of their manager. And so we've got ineffective 20th century management paradigms at the bottom of the house. And in the middle, we've got 5 generations of people from around the world. And so until we move into a 21st century paradigm and model of leadership and management, which recognizes we've got 5 generations of people in the workplace, we're just going to keep making the same old mistakes and putting the wrong people in the wrong positions.
Absolutely. That is very true. Now, you raised a couple of very important points. So the outdated leadership playbooks, right? The older generation still driving in a way that was much more controlling, and the Gen Zs, as we discussed on Tuesday, are not being rubbed the right way with this approach. So that's definitely true. The intergenerational differences are wreaking havoc in teams because people just don't know how to work together, and assumptions are flying left, right, and center. David, do you have anything to say about that?
I agree with Kevin, and I think that in terms of what we hear from our clients, Everybody contacts us when they've got a fire. It's never preventative. It's never proactive. It seems it's always, now we've got a problem. How do we fix it? And I think that much of what Kevin said is reflected in the commentary that I get from clients, and in terms of old models and people not knowing what to do with the new people coming up behind. And Emily certainly spoke to that at length and in some detail yesterday with regard to the Gen Z, and the fact that that's a whole excuse me, a whole cohort who doesn't seem to be much interested in leadership roles to begin with, which is a separate challenge in addition to what do you do with leaders and get them ready to be leaders and et cetera. What the heck do you do with people who aren't even interested in assuming the responsibility? Um, so it's multifaceted, and the timing of this conversation is really good. And I said this in the last meeting. I'm surprised by how little we hear from clients looking for this sort of assistance. I don't have an exact reason as to why we don't get more inquiries, but I've been harping at my clients and in articles and whatnot for several years, talking about the impending institutional knowledge drain that's walking out the door as the baby boomers and the who is it, the oldest millennials behind them are 1 foot out the door.
No, Generation X, so I would say.
Okay, sorry.
Millennials are not retiring just yet, I
Not
hope.
quite. Okay. It's hard to keep all these generations straight. At any rate, those two are the ones who are going to leave soon and leave gaps. And there's definitely a deficit in terms of who's available to fill those shoes. And then you add the extra wrinkle of here's a whole bunch of people we already have and they don't want the job. So promoting them may not be a real advantage to organizations unless they do a heck of a lot of groundwork to prep and encourage that sort of promotion before they actually put people in the roles.
Mhm. Well, there are, especially among larger organizations, they are, at least some of them are doing talent programs, right? Like one of our biggest clients is doing that, and we are running their 360 debriefs for them, so that the potential leaders, and they also include people on the expert path. They get an opportunity to see how their behavior is really landing with the people that they work with the most. And that prepares them for coaching or even self-development, because armed with this knowledge, they can really tackle the blind spots and the skill gaps and the outdated patterns that are no longer serving them. So some organizations are already doing that, and maybe many are. According to your experience, Kevin, the companies that you are working with, are they running talent programs to develop future leaders, to develop the succession?
That was the next point that I was going to make in response to both David and you. One of the outdated models is that in the 20th century, the focus was on the top 10 to 15% of the house. And in the 21st century, we have replaced leadership development with talent and leadership development, because talent is throughout the organization. Talent is attractive to Gen Z and millennials. It's just they don't necessarily want to climb the ladder. And so our clients who have replaced that 20th century narrow model of leadership development with talent and leadership development offers options to Gen Z and millennials. That doesn't mean you have to have workshops for every generation inside the organization, but you let everyone know that a priority of the organization is developing their talent. And that's becoming a competitive advantage. People will leave an organization because they don't have that option.
Right, and that is an excellent point, because not everybody wants to become a manager, right, or people manager. People have beef with that because some of them don't. Some of them think that the natural progression of their career is, of course, people management, regardless of whether they are equipped for that in terms of people skills or social skills or leadership skills. or no matter whether they actually have a true interest in doing the administrative work that inevitably comes with that. So then we've got leaders with excellent technical skills being promoted into leadership roles because that's the only career path available in the organization. And they are ill-equipped to lead. And there are some major consequences for that, and we'll get into that later. But it is important to have an expert path so that even people who don't want to go into leadership, they can feel that the organization cares about them and about their development. Right? Anything to add, David? David?
No, I have nothing to add to that.
Okay. All right. So that's the crux, right? People being promoted into incompetence, which is the title of this session, because of technical skills. And in that case, the company is losing a highly skilled expert and gaining a poor manager because they don't provide them with the support that they need to excel as a leader. Now, Kevin, let me ask you, we had that discussion on Tuesday. Are leaders born or developed? What's your take on the nature versus nurture
Well, the
continuum?
majority of highly effective leaders develop over the course of their life. They're not, some people are born with some of the attributes, but for the most part, highly effective leaders develop over the course of their life. And to complement something you just shared, in addition to promoting people based on technical abilities, which was one of the oversights of the 20th century model of leadership, what we've learned in the 21st century is that there are other elements that are even more important than technical capabilities, such as emotional intelligence, personality, and so and it's this goes beyond
coachability, right? As well, and work ethics and all, like it's a package deal. What you need in a leader, right?
And it's not just competencies. The 20th century they jumped off the cliff with competencies, but it's much more than competencies in the 21st century. As I mentioned, emotional intelligence, personality, global mindset, and a few other things.
Yes, absolutely. And we've done a lot of like large scale studies with all our assessments, but especially focusing on the emotional intelligence, and it really plays a major role regardless of where you are in the hierarchy. Of course, it's extremely important for leaders. It's extremely important for people who are working with people. So sales, customer service, but it makes a difference even at the lowest ranks of the organization in terms of ability to self-motivate, in terms of loyalty. Right, Debbie? Anything to add to that?
I'm remembering the study that we did where we compared 4 groups: people who are high in IQ, high in EQ, people who are low on IQ and high in EQ, and then low or low high. Anyways, it turned out that having just a high EQ was enough to be successful. Not as much as the people who had both, but very, very close. And the gap between the low people, especially the low IQ people, and the high IQ people was gigantic. And IQ alone with the low emotional intelligence the impact was devastating. They were unhappy, they were less likely to get promoted, lower work satisfaction, lower performance ratings. So that gap there and the combination of both, but even having just one, the impact was amazing.
Absolutely.
Deb, in response to what you just shared with us, when we look at the psychological research, we know that people are born with their IQ, but they're not born with their EQ. They have to develop their emotional intelligence through life, through experience, and working with other people. So emotional intelligence is learnable over time.
But to capitalize,
It definitely is. Sorry.
to add to that, we've had a pandemic and a whole cohort of people who have been interacting with the world through screens more than anything else. And that's a whole group who are, by the virtue of when they were born and what occurred during their early lifetime, they've been denied that opportunity to build those skills to the same extent that our generation and past generations were able to. If you're not out on a sports team because you can't get within 6 feet of each other, et cetera, you lose the opportunity to encounter those difficulties, learn those skills, and learn the skills and abilities required to overcome conflicts and et cetera. So there, again, and I said this in the last meeting, it seems that every time we start talking about these sorts of things, not this subject specifically, but testing in general and hiring and onboarding and promotion, it's more a case of shades of gray and nuance than it is black and white almost every single time.
And speaking of screens, I don't want to go on a total tangent here, but studies are showing that actually, as screens are being introduced into schools, it's making kids less successful, even less academically successful. Just the fact of being stuck on the screen, even during class time. So. But that's a totally different conversation. Anybody else wants to contribute to this discussion? Anthony, Janice?
Since COVID, what we've observed is, and I read about this elsewhere, so I don't think we're unique, is that there's a different level of, I don't know, energy that is taking place amongst staff people, which requires a whole other set of leadership skill sets that traditionally they haven't had to get involved with. It's being empathetic and yet holding people accountable. And I think, of course, if you see all the Gallup studies, there's a high level of disengagement at the same time. So I definitely think, as we've been talking about, that the leadership skills that are required these days are much more demanding and broader than they've been in decades past.
Absolutely, and the need for empathy, empathy skills, and being able to use empathy in a strategic way, right? And there are actually neuroscience studies that show how the frequency that people walk into a room with rubs off on other people. Like someone walks into a room and everything lines up, right? But when someone who is anxious or very negative walks into the room, the cortisol level of other people actually increases. Isn't that amazing? And these are true measures of cortisol levels, but the same is true about dopamine and other feel-good hormones, right? So if the leader is not capable of basically rising the vibe of their team and bring in this negative energy, or they feel incompetent or they feel anxious about leading, well, it rubs off on people. Anthony, do you have anything to add to that?
Sure, just about a book's worth of comments, but I'll just keep it brief. I guess we're talking about the Peter Principle, but Lawrence J. Peter, who I guess is a Canadian, who spoke about people being promoted until they reach a level of incompetence. And it's a typical thing, you have salespeople in your organization, and the best salesman gets promoted and becomes a sales manager. Well, he's a good salesman, but he's not a good manager. And it brings me back to good old Mike Harris. So for those of you, I lived in Toronto for 32 years. Alana would know that. So I'm both Canadian as well as a citizen of Trinidad. But I remember when Mike Harris was a conservative, he was elected Premier of Ontario. He was like, I guess he was an early version of Donald Trump. You know, he just came in and said, "This is what I'm going to do, and whether you like it or not." I remember him saying, "Why do we have teachers who get promoted to vice principals and promoted to principals?" And they run the school. They don't know anything about running a school, you know. So they're great teachers in the classrooms. He brought in people from the business world to run schools, and it was like, what are you doing, right? But he was like a very sort of common sense kind of a guy. He just thought that the Peter principles are often at work even in the school system. So yeah, so I was just sort of doing some searches myself to find out how do companies mitigate the Peter principle from happening. And I guess one thing is to consider hiring people from the outside. Is it may be that all the people you have in a particular group, they have all the technical abilities, but they may not have the managerial skills. So as you said, you know, Kevin, personality, you know, when you do this personality assessments, people would see, you know, conscientious may not make the greatest leaders, but, you know, be very sort of transactional, but people, the D and the I, depends on what you want. But I suppose you have people who have that strong personality can lead organizations. So you're absolutely right. It's just there's so many different facets to this and solutions, and how do you, I guess, almost a case by case, company by company basis, how do you mitigate the Peter principle from happening?
Well, personally, I would push back on the hiring from the outside. Sometimes it is necessary, but frequently, in my opinion, it's better to promote from within, but provide people with the tools, with the coaching, with the feedback that they need in order to improve. What is your take, Kevin, on that?
Well, since I also work in the field of hiring and selection, the research is very clear that organizations hire in their own image, meaning they don't step back and take a look at where they are today, where they need to be tomorrow, and then say, we need to hire kind of a diversified portfolio of person. They stay stuck in hiring in their own image, and then they don't make progress and wonder why they don't make progress. And so that's another paradigm to break, is that most organizations hire in their own image, but we need to get away from that and look at what's required today, what's going to be required tomorrow, and make sure we have a kind of a multiplicity of perspectives internally and externally to prepare the organization for moving forward. That's been our most significant observation, is hiring in one's own image.
Interesting. Interesting. So basically the similarity bias, right? While it really takes heterogeneous teams to be fully creative, right? Like in the long run, heterogeneous teams do perform better. If you need to hit the road running, then yes, if you have homogeneous team, it is going to be beneficial because everybody agrees. With heterogeneous teams, you need to negotiate and you need to ponder different points of view, and someone needs to make a call, which is an Achilles heel in matrix style organizations because nobody wants to make the final call, and consensus is required, which you know, in that case, the time to make the decision spins out of proportion. David, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I have a personal experience. I was hired a million years ago as a manager of customer service for the country's largest aerosol manufacturer. And I struggled in the role because I had two individuals on the team I was responsible for who were just obstinate and difficult, and I could not figure out for the longest time what was going on and why they were, right from day one, really combative with me. And I was so new. It's like, I haven't had a chance to piss you off yet. I haven't been here long enough to do anything. What's the problem? And it wasn't until about 8 months in, somebody took me aside and said, "Oh, by the way, if nobody told you, both of those two people were offered your job and one of them was hired to do it. And then they changed their mind and hired you from outside." And you're like, well, thanks for telling me. that would have been good to know going in. I mean, no wonder Sheldon hates my guts. I've got his job as far as he's concerned. So there is, again, nuance. It's not just hire from without or promote from within. There's a way to do it properly. And I was able to see it firsthand go very, very badly wrong in this particular situation. And you think, like, if only the communication had been better, or maybe they shouldn't have hired me at all, and they should have spent more time training and developing Sheldon to be in that role, and none of us would have been having this conversation. But I think, as Kevin said, they got their butts behind the 8 ball, had to make a decision and do something quickly. And I walked in with my eyes wide open and not being able to see anything in front of me, and got hit like a ton of bricks.
Hmm. Hmm. Uh, yeah, common story. And that brings me kind of to another topic that I didn't plan to talk about, but dealing with difficult people, right? That is a major challenge for leaders. And if they don't have the emotional intelligence and the knowledge on how to uncover what is really behind it, like you did, David, right? And it took 8 months to get to the point where you finally figured it out. But sometimes, you have people who are falling behind. They don't perform well. They are defiant or resistant or defensive. And if the leader doesn't have the skills to figure out what's behind it, what's really the root problem, they cannot deal with it. And then that's where what I think Anthony was talking about, that uh, the vicious circle of the leaders not having the guts to confront the person, and not having, because they don't have the skills, they haven't trained for that. So they don't confront them, they cover for them, or the team members cover for this person. That builds resentment. And the leaders and the other team members are running around trying to accomplish work of someone else who is just coasting along, feeling sorry for themselves, and having their own self-confidence eroded in the process, right? Anything comes to mind? Kevin, David, anybody else?
Well, the common denominator in that situation, Alona, is emotional intelligence. And when we assess the people who are difficult, and we assess the people who are the leaders, an interesting outcome is that there are 5 components of emotional intelligence. 2 of the 5 have to do with intrapersonal intelligence, the degree to which a person really understands themselves. The people who are the difficult people typically score low on those 2 components.
Mm-hmm.
The leader who hasn't developed the other 3, which are interpersonal intelligence, the degree to which you understand how to work with others, they typically score low on those 3, and they can't get anywhere because of that. But they typically have varying degrees of emotional intelligence along the 5 components. And that's something that's very helpful for managers and leaders to understand, is where are they along the 5 components? And in particular, have they developed the 3 that have to do with dealing with people who are quite different and difficult?
Mm-hmm. And I think part of the problem, well, first of all, there is a focus on rationality and logic, and it's still a myth that most people believe that they should hang emotions at the door when they walk into the office, and then they just don't pay attention to their emotions or to the emotions of others, and they get resentful if someone shows their emotions. But that also means that people are leaving a lot of information on the table, because emotions have access to like 90% of information available to us. They are the portal to the subconscious, right? And that's where triggers tend to live in the subconscious. So people are getting triggered and they are reacting on the spot instead of actually taking a moment, figuring out what is really going on, and then taking the time to figure out how to actually respond in a positive way.
Yeah, Lon, I was going to add something else as well, too. Given the situation David said he walked into a number of years ago, it's almost like if, I mean, hindsight is 2020. So if I were David, even back then, or now having to walk into that situation, but not being told that you're taking somebody else's job, I would almost assume my emotional intelligence would tell me I'm being hired from the outside. There are probably people who might have wanted this job. So right away, I would come in with the mentality is, okay, there's probably going to be some hostility here. I'm going to try to even preempt it or assume that it is there, even though nobody's told me that. And I'll tell you why, because when I did consulting in IT for many years, I had my own, after I left at GE, I started my own consultancy, and most of my clients were law firms. I mean, the smallest client was 200 users all the way up to McCarthy Tetra, which was like 2,000 users across Canada. And I remember them having very strong IT departments. So, the consultants sometimes have a bit of a label on it. They seem to think that they know it all. So I'm going to come into your company and I'm the expert and, I'm going to tell you what to do and so on. And so right away, I would understand that even before going in, I'm saying, you know what? They're going to probably see me with this consultant label, thinking that I know more than them. So right away, my approach would always be, oh, hi, John, he's the head of the IT department. John, I'm just here to be an extension of your IT department. You're very knowledgeable. I'm sure you know what you do. It's probably because you're too busy, you have too many projects on the go. That's why the GM brought my company in. So how can I be a part of your team? So I would almost preempt the fact that there may be some resentment for them to bring in an outside consultancy into the mix. And so I often found out I did a lot of skills transfers. By the time I left, I'm like, okay, great. I've empowered you guys to do this, to run the system, and here, listen, call me if you have any problems. So I always feel that emotional intelligence is also you need to anticipate prior to, and so yeah, it's just as I say, a skill that as Kevin mentioned, a skill that thank God that can be developed over time.
Well, yes, but we also see some major age differences, right? Like people develop emotional intelligence over time with life experience and with the knocks that life serves us, and I think. Yes, maybe you're right. It could have been expected that there might be possibly some resentment, but then people need to be cued in on that, right? And if you send an unsuspecting manager into a hellhole, really, you need to help them manage the situation. You need to, first of all, communicate properly. Because what David was talking about, it should have been communicated to you.
Oh, yeah, sure.
For sure. That one is on the higher management that didn't bother to mention that. And that's really the sink or swim mentality in companies that we see so often, and that is why people are failing in the leadership roles, because companies just promote them based on seniority or based on technical skills without ensuring that they have the tools they need to succeed. Would you
It
agree
would have
with
been
that?
helpful as well if I'd been as smart as Anthony and anticipated some of this, but I was pretty wet behind the ears, and it was one of my first kind of career positions as opposed to, summer jobs and et cetera. And I walked in blindly without any of the training or any of the experience that I needed to have and should have been given. And in retrospect, looking back at that company, which was one small division of a huge international conglomerate that did all kinds of products and manufacturing and et cetera, we were just the cans and spray paint division. I realize now, looking back, that at no point do I recall anybody doing any training of any kind or anything with regard to assessments. I mean, now it's my life and it's what I do, and I think about it all the time. And I'm constantly interacting with companies and thinking, holy cow, do you people need assessments? But at that point, I didn't know any better. And I look back now and think, wow, this could have been so much better and things could have been run so much differently had we sat people down and given them some competency measures or emotional intelligence, which wasn't even a thing back then.
Mhm, mhm.
But even a straightforward personality work style competency test or a team building assessment or an interpersonal communication or conflict resolution tool, all of which existed at the time, would have been beneficial. But nobody at the management level, and certainly not me, ever thought to talk about them or engage with them or anything like that.
Yeah, the thing is, I would say even the vast majority of people, because 82% of companies get the leadership promotion wrong, according to Gallup, right? Uh, and and leaders are put into this position, and basically they are expected to fly a plane with 300 passengers aboard while they are learning how to fly, and sometimes they are just given a self-paced online course to learn how to fly the plane. It's unfair. It's unfair towards the leaders. It's unfair to the team members, because then frustration builds up, creativity and innovation, of course, go down. Collaboration is just not happening because everybody is funding for themselves, and watching out for whatever hit might come from the background. So it makes it really difficult. And of course, for the organization, while culture suffers, and the bottom line in the very end as well. Kevin?
Well, David's interesting story. By the way, David, how long did you last in that management role?
How much do I want to disclose? Let's put it this way. There was a corporate culture that impacted things. I ran into a lot of exactly what Ilona is talking about, and I became irritated. And I'm a wear it on my sleeve, shoot from the hip. I can't keep my emotions off my face sort of guy, and I run with scissors and I don't share and I throw sand in the sandbox. I'm one of those type. It's a damn good thing I work for myself now. Took me a few interactions with corporate, the corporate world before I realized I don't fit well into this cubicleized white collar work environment. And when I finally stumbled into doing my own thing, it was like, oh, thank God I figured that out. So
Yes,
shorter
yes.
answer to your question is not that long. A little over a year and a half, but by the time I was shown the door, the writing was already on the wall, and my productivity and my attitude and work ethic had fallen so far that it was like, I know what's going to happen, but if you think I'm going to make it easy for you and leave under my own power, forget about it. You can pay me out and golden parachute me and I'll walk away, but not until that happens. So I was at least, Anthony, smart enough to anticipate that.
Good for you. Good for you.
Well done.
Hmm.
Well done.
I actually had talked to a client who refused to go into managerial position, despite the fact that he had a great profile to be a leader. And so that was during a 360 session, actually. And when we explored that and dived a little deeper, it came up as a traumatic experience from like 10 years ago, where he was in a leadership position, and there was some major conflict, feelings got hurt, and he crawled back into his shell. and started learning these people skills and so forth. So he truly improved. But it was like, no, like management, leadership, absolutely not. And so it really, the company was deprived of a potentially an excellent leader because of an experience that could have been healed a long time ago if he was provided the support, and it wouldn't have had to happen in the first place. Now we worked on that, and I think he's eyeing for a management position now, but it took almost 10 years to come to that realization. Isn't that sad? Like a big chunk of the person's career was lost in the meantime.
So in response to your question, Alona, I have a very good real world example, and I would ask people to respect the confidentiality of the example I'm going to share with them. When Microsoft decided they needed to move away from Steve Ballmer, who was very much a 20th century transactional leader focused on knowing it all, and moved to Satya Nadella, who is very much a transformational leader focused on learn it all, they decided to bring in a small group of global executive coaches in their three primary regions to help with this shift. And I must give them credit because, in spite of their pattern in the past, they decided we're going to break with that pattern. We're going to make the right choice to bring in the right assessments that help with strategic self-awareness, personality, and emotional intelligence. And we're going to facilitate live conversations with groups of 50 people at a time where they had to practice the new insight and say, how does this apply to the new Microsoft that's evolving? And so they made the right decision on the assessment, the right decision on global executive coaches, and most important, the right decision on bringing in facilitators who knew how to recreate live scenarios where they had to be very open and transparent around what they were doing that wasn't working and what they needed to start doing to be more effective.
And
I
learn
had the
from
Asia,
each other as well,
learn from
right?
each other.
And as a byproduct, increase the team's cohesion. That's what I'm finding when we are running workshops on emotional intelligence or negotiation skills, communication, and so forth. When you bring the team to a workshop like that, and you use real life examples, scenarios that they submit as canvas for the learning, well, not only makes it more engaging, but it truly increases the cohesion of the team and the collaboration because they are learning about each other, and they are willing to show some vulnerability, right? And
Yes.
that is a bonding exercise in and on itself. Being willing and able to show that, okay, well, I don't know it all, and I'm okay to open up and learn as part of this group.
Yes, and since I had a 10.5 year residence in Singapore, I was assigned the Asia Pacific region. And so the 50 people in my cohort had represented 15 different languages, 25 different cultures. And the nice thing about it is that these principles behind personality, emotional intelligence, and strategic self-awareness, they're universal. They cut across cultures. They cut across languages.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's just a very real world example. And the senior leadership team at the time recognized they needed to change the playbook on talent and leadership development. And so.
Absolutely. Well, tell us a little bit about cultural differences, and then we'll go to my head full of burning questions.
Well, when we look at the gold standard research on global leadership, global mindset, we find that in the GLOBE study. Are any of the other people on the call familiar with the GLOBE study?
No?
It's the international gold standard of research that is ongoing and they publish about every 5 to 10 years updates. And I was involved with that because I'm a graduate of the Thunderbird School of Global Management, and my faculty advisor was one of the 2 faculty that were behind that. And one of the things that came out of that is that on a universal basis, while there are some nuances based on geography and culture, there's actually a fundamental set of principles that are universal in terms of leadership effectiveness. And so those of us who were working with clients that had global teams, they found that very valuable because we were able to honor the uniqueness of a particular culture and at the same time say, hey, you might be from New York, but when you're in Beijing, here are some adjustments that need to be made when you're working with Chinese nationals. And I would just say for people on the call, Google Globe Study, you'll find it exceptionally relevant and useful, and they're constantly updating their research on that.
Okay, thank you. Okay. All right. So, anybody wants to speak up, or shall I go and pull a
I
question?
will briefly. We have a number of different tools that address intercultural communication, intercultural sensibility, diversity awareness, cross-cultural readiness. A very cool tool to help figure out if somebody's ready to go and be placed in an international, outside North America environment for work, and whether they're going to be able to adapt to that or not. And it's another one of these variables that affects leadership and a whole bunch of other things. And I think that part of the problem, there's so many, part of the problem is corporate culture, where if people aren't thinking in these directions or aren't aware or aren't sensitive or emotionally intelligent to that, they overlook these things, and they focus on the leadership, they focus on the skills, they focus on the team building, but they don't look at this aspect of it, which can have a big impact on success or lack thereof. And I don't think that there are a huge number, and if I'm wrong, please correct me. I don't think there are a huge number of tools developed or available to address those sorts of things. And so it's not completely surprising that a lot of organizations aren't even aware of them to begin with. But certainly when it comes to corporate culture, that has a huge impact on everything. And it usually flows from the top down. And without disclosing details and getting into a long story, we've had issues with that too, where you go and do your proposal or meet with whoever you're meeting with and realize that the person at the top is a bit of a jerk. And it's hardly surprising that people underneath them are also jerks, because as Kevin pointed out, organizations hire in mirror image of themselves. And people also, we've learned certainly the last few years with cancel culture and et cetera, woe betide the person who's brave enough or stupid enough to put their head above the parapet. You're the first guy to get it lopped off. And so people are loath to go against the grain, and they take their cue from the top down, and everything flows the way it flows, often to the detriment of the entire organization and everyone working within it.
What's the name of that assessment you're referring to, David?
The cross-cultural adaptability inventory is one. There's the diversity and cultural awareness test or inventory. Hang on, I'll talk amongst yourselves while I look this up, and I'll put it in the notes.
Well, the reason I
Okay.
asked that question is we work with a lot of global multinationals, and we have people in 66 different countries. And one of the things we share with them is that you've got to have sufficient global mindset or intercultural competence if you're being moved from New York to Frankfurt or from Frankfurt to
Right.
Singapore. You've got to have that. And there are assessments that help you better understand that. And so I just wanted to confirm that that's a very important criteria to measure. And we advise our clients that if you don't invest in that and preparing your people for international assignments, you're not doing your part in preparing them for a successful international assignment.
No, it's very
And
true.
it's going to come back and bite you in the behind.
Yep.
That is for sure.
I
Yeah.
put the link to the page on our site that contains all these tools, and they're not all, they're some of them are interrelated for other reasons, but they're literally only about 3 or 4 out of the thousands of things we carry. There are literally about 3 that address culture specifically. Some others included as part of their overall measure and other things, but these 3 or 4 are really well focused. And the cross-cultural adaptability has been around for a dog's age. It's an interesting, inexpensive, and very effective tool. But like I said, most people don't even know these things exist.
Yes.
Are they easy to fake, David?
Shoot, you'd ask me a question like that and expect me to know the answer. Yes and no. I mean, we all know anything. If you don't come at the assessment honestly and openly, yes, it's going to be skewed, whether it's faking good or faking bad. It can happen with any assessment. These ones, I would say less so, because they're not being given in general to people who are trying to get a job. They're getting given to people who already have the job and need to move somewhere else, or they're assessing a skill to ensure that you have success and where they're going to post you. So there's less likelihood that people are going to try to obfuscate or blow a lot of smoke up people's skirts and put their best foot forward and present a favorable image of themselves. People are much more likely to be beguilingly honest in responding to these questionnaires.
Yeah,
The important thing is
I guess
we can measure that. We can measure that. That's
What?
the important. We can measure global mindset, intercultural
Yes.
competence, and if you use the right assessments, the validity is built into that. So we can tell if somebody is faking it or
Right.
not. We can tell. We can tell.
if they have a social desirability scale or faking good, faking
Right.
bad scale. But definitely, if it's framed within like a personal or leadership development, then the likelihood of faking good is much higher. Of course, if you put that as a pre-employment assessment, you are most likely not going to get really honest answers. If the
And that
stakes are
applies
high, or in other words,
that applies to all assessments. That's why we always encourage our clients to use gold standard assessments, meaning they have good reliability, they have good retake, they have good algorithms, so we can tell if somebody is faking it or not. And so the selection of the right assessment is critical. I was curious to our guests from the outside, Anthony, Janice, and I can't see the name of the other woman. Based on what you've heard so far in the conversation, is there a pressing or relevant question you would like to ask that relates to your participation in this roundtable today?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to jump in and go back to the original question, Alon, that I put when I signed up, and is that how do leaders today or managers, no matter what level they're at, circumvent this being bogged down with transactional stuff? Because we all have emails, we all have word processors, we all are our own secretaries, which I think plays very well into Bill Gates's hands. Because I remember when my career in IT started in 1987. I'm dating myself here, and the personal computer was invented by IBM in 1981. So needless to say, I kind of grew up through the growing pains. And I remember way back then, Bill Gates said something very interesting. He said his goal, his vision was to have a personal computer in every household. And we said, is this guy crazy? Like, what drug is he on? You'll never have a personal computer in everybody's home. Today, I mean, these are personal computers, right? So I would say everyone probably has about 5 personal computers. So we thought he was being a little ambitious. He underestimated what would happen. So, and obviously every manager has a computer on his desk. And so, I mean, I speak to managers who get literally 100 to 200 emails a day. Okay, so how do you respond to all? How do you be transformational? It's almost like, I think, I was listening to something, I think it was on BBC. Apparently some young people now are getting into some of these self-help groups, how to tune off from social media
Yeah.
for a few hours, just so they can reconnect and relearn some social skills, And it's becoming more and more popular, right? They do things like crochet or reading books or whatever. So it's almost
Yeah.
managers need to say, listen, how do we disconnect from, you know, certainly this has made Bill Gates very rich, of course, wonderful, but I'm sure Bill Gates really cares about who is a transformational leader, who's not a transformational leader. So it's almost like we are victims of somebody else's, you know, vision of the world. And why should we keep swimming in a river where the dye is purple and we're all getting purple? And so I guess that's life. We just have to remain purple, right? So how do we jump out of that?
We don't have to remain purple.
Okay.
We can go for rainbow colors if we choose to. It is within our ability to choose the 20% of the things that really move the needle. And letting go of the 80% of the noise. That is one way to deal with that. And that, I mean, there are different tools and tricks to do that in terms of time management, in terms of eliminating the time confetti that we have gotten ourselves into. I think that's the main problem. So the devices themselves are not the issue, and AI today is actually helping us become much more efficient at a number of tasks if used properly. But the thing is, we are spreading ourselves thin, and it is our own fault. We are attending back-to-back meetings so that we don't have time for real, actual work, right? We are dividing our attention into these tiny fragments called time confetti, which are pretty much useless. We are trying to multitask, and we are always on, over functioning, and getting disrupted all the time, so that we don't get like solid hour or 45 minutes to actually focus on something. That's my take on it. That's how you create the space, the mental and emotional space, the thinking space, and the time to work on what really matters for leaders, which is strategy, which is coaching, which is making sure that they remove those obstacles from their team's path, so that that they can give autonomy, which requires coaching, right? Like if you cannot trust your team, of course, you cannot delegate a task, but if you coach the person to be autonomous, well, then look at all that time that frees up for things that really matter. Do you have an opinion, David or Kevin, or anyone
Yes,
else?
Anthony, I have two replies to that very astute question that you asked. First of all, there's a name for this condition that exists on a global basis. It's called continuous partial attention. Continuous partial attention. It was coined by a very brilliant woman in the early days of Microsoft, Linda Stone, who recognized that workers around the world were exaggerating the use of multitasking. There are times and places where multitasking is appropriate, but it became an overused tool. And as a result, nobody was actually doing anything very well. And so her contribution was to say, we're all caught up in this continuous partial attention. However, we need to step back from that. And the second comment is, it's important to learn how to prioritize work. Not everything is urgent. Not everything has to be done yesterday. What's an A? What's a B? What's a C? And if you're not role modeling that as a leader, then your entire organization not only gets caught up in continuous partial attention, but something I call the FedEx syndrome, because everybody thinks everything's urgent, and that's simply not the truth.
So let me play devil's
Absolutely. I
advocate
have to.
yeah, I was going to
I
play
have.
devil's advocate a little bit. Sorry, Lana. You know, but the problem though is this, David and Alana, and Kevin, sorry. The problem is simply this: if a manager is getting 100 to 200 emails a day, and his manager or the CEO of the company expects a certain response time, If you simply say, well, I'm just going to carve out some time today, then you may deal with 50 of your emails or 75, but another 25 have not been dealt with. Then tomorrow now you have 100 plus the 25, then it's 150. So the expectation is there, as you say, the FedEx syndrome. Unfortunately, I have most managers tell me they're on 24 hours. They have their phone by their bedside. They're responding at 2 o'clock in the morning. That's expected of them. And so, and worse than that, what about when they go on vacation? Here's another thing. I'm sure all of you are aware of this. When somebody gets 100 emails a day, they go on vacation for a week to the Caribbean where I live. So I'm always on vacation, I guess I would say. But so then, so now you come back now along from vacation. You have a choice, two things. Let's say go with your spouse, your wife, your husband. While you say, well, I'm going to respond to my emails while my spouse is sleeping. So so pretend I'm on vacation. So now you're responding. So you're not really unwinding. That's one way of dealing with it. So when you come back to the office, you don't have 700 emails to deal with. Or you say, you know what? I'll deal with it when I come back. I won't respond to anything. If your manager allows you to do that. You come back now from vacation. Now you have 700 emails that you have to deal with, and the hundreds coming every day. So in other words, I think having an IT background, I think Microsoft should come up with not a fixed, but a type of rule in Outlook that simply says, hi, I'm Anthony Hadid. I'm currently on vacation for the next week. This mailbox will not be accepting any emails. So please contact my assistant. Otherwise, the email will bounce right back to you. So then I go on vacation.
Yeah, well, you do have autoresponders, and you can definitely say that. But you're hitting an important point.
No, but the problem is that even the Outlook responders, you still come back with the email in your inbox. In other words, you have to, let's you clear up your inbox before you go on vacation. You want to come back to that same empty inbox. Unfortunately, if you put the autoresponders, which we all do, you still get the email. You say I'm on vacation. Please contact my assistant. Guess what they do? They don't contact your assistant.
Well, the important point there, Anthony, is you need to align with your manager in terms of the expectations, how fast you are going to respond.
Right.
Okay. You can negotiate with your manager, and this actually Deb can attest to that. When we are preparing summary reports for the 360s that go to the manager, this is almost always there. Align with your direct report, allow them to carve out uninterrupted periods of time of at least 45 minutes. Align with them on that. Agree that your expectation is not an immediate response, because that is what kills productivity. Okay, and it takes education. Managers need to understand that they are actually shooting themselves in the foot. And sometimes it's just an assumption on the direct reports side that they need to be responsive. And I see that all the time. Like, it's one of the most common blind spots that people are really having this fragmented attention, and they don't have a solid block of time to actually get in the flow and get things done. And then that's why they are working evenings and catching up on the weekends. Okay. And if the manager doesn't come up with that, then the manager needs to be educated, and maybe people can just go in their one-on-ones and ask for that, and just say, listen, I'm getting really fragmented, and I think the quality of my work is suffering. What can we do? Can I suggest this? And if the manager is wise, they are going to accept that and wake up to the fact that, of course, you cannot expect high quality work from someone who spends an average of 90 seconds on a single task. And that's the truth. Like, we switch screens when we are working. Studies have been done, and the max we stay on the same screen is like for 4 minutes. How can we expect any kind of productivity with that? So people need to wise up. David, you wanted to add something?
because I'm the nuance guy in this conversation, apparently. And Kevin, back me up on this if you can. We had friends who emigrated from England, stayed here a decade, blah, blah, blah. And in one of the jobs that the wife got, she was presented with her first BlackBerry, and her husband was appalled by the fact that she was now required and expected to be available to respond to things at night. And he said, it's never out of her hands. We used to have nice evenings together and blah, blah, blah. Now she's tied to this bloody device. And they both complained bitterly after the first year or so about the North American work ethic and cultural attitude that you are working and therefore you're available and you should be. And they complained like you wouldn't believe. And I wasn't aware of it because I'm North American. And when they started telling us how many days off a year they got, how many weeks of vacation they were allowed right from the start of a job, as opposed to you need to be here a year before you get more than 14 days. I know you can't take them consecutively. It has to be 2 weeks at different times, blah, blah, blah. And they were like, how do you people live? You're always working. You're never allowed any time off. And even when you're not on work, you're expected to be working or available to work. And it was a real eye opener for me growing up here and having that as my normal experience. And I've certainly built a reputation with our company being very responsive to emails. People know after a period of time working with me that if they don't hear, I've had people call me because I haven't emailed them back within 15 minutes because they're so used to getting that sort of responsiveness. And I'm fine doing that. And I'm good at multitasking and organizing my time. But it all stops at 5:15 on a Friday. And I don't care. After that, you're on your own. It can wait till Monday. And if it's critical, it's still waiting till Monday. I'm not here. But I'm living a rarefied existence working for myself. There are lots of people out there who don't have that luxury, who aren't allowed, and who can't get away from it. And it's not just what you were saying, Ilona. There's also and a continental cultural mentality that goes along with this that forces people into these corners where they don't feel that they have any lives left, and is partly why we're hearing so much all the time about work-life balance, because for a lot of people in our economy, there ain't none.
David,
yes, and that's also why the Jay-Zs don't want leadership positions in the first place. But like it's, and I know it's not just about leadership, right?
Of course not.
Yeah, Kevin, you wanted to say something?
Well, I wanted to ask Janice what her question was, but she just sent us a message that she has to move on to her next appointment since we're towards the end of the call. So,
But I just want
Okay.
to
go back to David's comment.
Yeah,
David,
just to say
the bottom.
Oh, I was going to say, Kevin, not to cut you, but if you tell your manager, listen, I want to have an hour in my day to block off, but then the volume of emails just keeps coming in. I think what you need to be able to tell your managers, I get 100 emails a day, and I have to do word processing and type up contracts. Guess what? I only want to get 50 emails a day. So who's going to take the other 50 emails? Is my assistant or somebody else? I cannot deal with 100 emails a day and block off an hour to be strategic and so on. So it's almost along, you have to. It's like this Gen Z is trying to disconnect and try to have more other things. So I think it is simply the volume of transactions that managers have to deal with personally, because emails get sent to them. So that's I still think the question needs to be answered, because it is simply the volume of transactions. A manager cannot keep up with them. If he falls behind, it's going to just add on to tomorrow's. So I still think there
So
needs to be some global
let's give the
mindset.
mic to Kevin. Kevin, do you have an answer for Anthony?
Well, my comment applies to both David and Anthony. The bottom line is that pattern needs to stop, and that pattern needs to be broken. I don't have an answer. There's no silver bullet. However, that pattern needs to stop, and it needs to be broken, because when you look at the expectation of people in the global workplace, especially Gen Z and millennials, they're coming in with a different perspective. They're coming in with, tell me how employment with your organization is going to assist me with my life, my career, and my well-being. There's a new element, my well-being. Well, one of the ways is to stop that pattern. There's no silver bullet. There's no easy answer, but the expectation and the question being asked globally is, how does working for you help me with my life, career, and well-being? And the younger ones have a lot of emphasis on well-being.
Mhm.
And maybe that's what is going to force companies to come to reason with
Well, there's
that.
another, sorry to jump in, and I'll be brief. There's another aspect to this as well. I've got a friend who works for the CRA, and for those who aren't Canadian on the call, if anybody, that's the Canadian Revenue Association, or whatever the hell it is.
Agency.
Not association, I didn't mean that. At any rate, she's been there for years, and we talk about a lot of stuff related to work and this sort of thing. And she says, I get inundated with emails because so many of them are carbon copied to 60 people, only 5 of which need to get them. So that clogs her inbox. And she goes, I'm constantly in meetings that could have been an email. And so that's a time sink that chews up hours of the day where you can't get done what you need to have done. And then you've got Anthony's problem. You come back to your desk and here are 20 more emails, 15 of which you didn't need to get in the first damn place, but they have to be dealt with. And so getting back to what Kevin was saying, this is a problem that seems to be running rampant throughout companies due to the technology and the inability of whomever it falls to solve this problem, to regulate things to a level where people can be productive, where they can get things done, and where they can focus where they need to focus their attention, instead of dealing with 100 emails a day, 40 of which they didn't need to get in the first place.
Right.
Exactly, and that happens all the time, especially in big teams.
Yes.
Everybody is CC'd on everything, and then there is a thread of thank yous, but you still have to open the freaking email and look inside to realize that it's just okay. I appreciate blah blah blah. So rules need to be set on an organizational level about meetings. I tell my clients, if the meeting would go on without you, if you were sick or on vacation and you couldn't attend, that's a candidate for cutting. And you can spearhead this movement within your organization. You can put that in your email signature, like I'm trying to optimize my time. If I'm really required to attend this meeting, if I have something to contribute, I will by all means attend. But if I'm there just to get information, I will happily read the minutes from the meeting. Like I looked at one of my clients, coaching clients, showed me her calendar, and I said, "This is insane. Like you cannot possibly do any actual work." And I challenged her to cut like half of it. And she did, and nothing happened. The sky didn't fall. She just became much more effective, But it was painful for her. Like she was cringing. Oh my God, no, I can't. Well, yes, you can. You can delegate some of it, and you can just get the information. Another pet peeve of mine is meetings that are scheduled for the entire hour, and then they run over, so people are late for the next meeting. So you've got 15 people waiting, basically not starting the agenda until everybody gets in the room, and it snowballs. So this was the first spin in the new series of roundtables like this. There will be more coming with different themes, different topics. So I hope that everybody joins us for the next spins. I want to leave everyone with one thought. Leadership is not just about the title, right? It's about the responsibility that we have towards the organization, towards our team, and towards society at large. It's always a bet. It's a gamble when we are hiring people, but it doesn't need to be. We can make sure that people are well equipped, and that's where assessments and coaching come in. And for those who are thinking that coaching and assessments are too expensive, what do we say to them, Kevin, in terms of ROI?
Well, first of all, select the assessment that's in alignment with your learning objectives. Number one. Select the right coaches that are exceptionally experienced with those assessments in alignment with your learning objectives. And by the way, what's the timeline against which you're measuring the return on investment in learning? Because it should not be in months. Should not be in months. It's a longer latitude that we need to put into place for that real return on investment and learning to come from. So that's my response to our clients.
And when you do get that return on investment, it is in terms of like hundreds, if not thousands of %. So it is worth it. I would say you cannot afford not to do that in terms of hiring, in terms of developing your leaders, and in terms of developing your talent. So thank you very much for your input, Kevin, David, and everybody else on the call, including Anthony. And I hope to see you the next time around as well.
Great.
Thank
you,
you.
Lana.
Thank you for the
Bye.
opportunity.
Okay.
All right.
Bye, David.
Bye for now.
Bye, Dan.
Thanks, Ilona. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.